Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Hoops HD. The and here we are on Wednesday, January 25th, the day after one of the more incredible nights in college basketball when we saw three of the top four teams in the nation all lose.
Yeah.
And here at Hoops HD tonight, we're going to be talking about none of that.
Mm, Why not? Oh, yeah, because this is under the radar.
This is under the radar. Uh,
Yeah.
yes, I'm your host, Chad Sherwood. With me over here, David Griggs. Down below there is John Stalika. We did have some amazing games both last night and this evening already, with Florida State getting completely crushed by Georgia Tech. But if you want to hear
Not
about that,
compared to Pittsburgh last night.
Oh, man.
ooh, yeah, Pittsburgh had a little bit of a rough night last night. But
Yeah.
yeah, but again, you want to hear more about those teams, actually come back in tomorrow and check out the podcast we're doing tomorrow night. We're going to be doing a bracket rundown. We will be talking about all that action and the rest of the results tonight. But this is our Under the Radar podcast. And we like to start these shows off by defining what it means to be under the radar. David, can you tell everybody what it means?
Well, essentially, it means that it's the teams that are not in the 10 multi-bid leagues. And holy crap, a window popped up, and it was just really loud in here for a second. But anyway, it's teams outside the 10 multi-bid leagues. That would be the Power 5 conferences, the Big 10, the SEC, the ACC, the Big 12, and the Pac-12. And in addition to that, it is the West Coast Conference, the Atlantic 10, the American, the Big East, and I'm forgetting one. Oh, wait, no, I'm not, because we relegated the Mountain West.
Yeah, at the beginning of the year, it also included the Mountain West, and now no longer does. Mountain West is here among the under the radar conferences, and the Atlantic 10 tried to sneak in here as well, I think, but not quite there yet.
Yeah.
Oh, I think we also have one other qualifier to go over, and that's if you're in the top 25, you're above the radar. So a team like UNC Wilmington that's knocking on the door, they may get
Very
bumped up to the Hoops HD report next week.
Right.
And David, I do have some big news that the Zoom where we're doing these podcasts has a new update today that will makes it very easy for me to mute you, as I just did. And you're back.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm very excited about this because it was very difficult to mute you before tonight. So we may have a little bit of fun with that. But let's go ahead and get to the actual games here, get to the actual teams here at least. And I'm going to pull up on the screen right here the Southern Conference. This is going to be our highlight conference for the night. Based on what happened tonight, it wasn't going to be our highlight conference until this evening. Stalika, we had two one-loss teams in the conference heading into play tonight. What happened?
Well, what happened is we are now ending up with four teams with two losses because Greensboro went to, Wofford, and actually lost at the Kennel there. Not much of a shock there, but the big shock was Chattanooga hosting VMI and getting their doors blown out at home.
Yeah, it was pitiful. It was not even competitive. Chattanooga looked bored. I don't know what it was they wanted to stay at home and watch on TV tonight, but I'm sorry they missed it.
Chad, let's take a closer look at that adjusted defense for VMI. 347, and I think Chattanooga couldn't even get into the 60s tonight against the Cadets.
Yeah, I'll pull up the actual score here on that Chattanooga VMI game today, as well as Chattanooga's profile, because quite honestly, this is a team that I was looking at as not as an at-large bid contender, but as a team that could, 13 seed and maybe even an outside shot at towing the 12 seed line. And not anymore when you lose at home by 16 points to VMI and only score 64 points against that defense.
One of the bigger upsets the other night, and we'll get to this later, we were talking about Texas Southern's loss to Mississippi Valley and how it was one of the bigger upsets of the day, maybe of the year. This one's bigger. This one's a lot bigger.
Well, as if that's not enough here, East Tennessee State, which is kind of the third team we've been looking at this season, they're playing as we record. They're only up 3 on Samford with about 8 minutes left in the game. We'll try to get a final score before we're done tonight on that. But we've got things are a little bit crazy here in the Southern Conference suddenly. And two big games coming up this weekend, actually, in the SoCon.
Yeah, and there's one team with two losses that we haven't mentioned yet, and that's Furman.
Yeah.
Well, Furman, if they can beat Greensboro this weekend, they could be sitting there in first place after this weekend.
Yeah, and again, craziness going on here because if you look, I mean, there's a four-way tie at least in the loss column for first place, and then I think there's only one or two more teams behind. I mean, we just saw the standings. Who are we looking at here? Is this Furman?
This was Furman's profile here.
Yeah.
They were the one team near the top of the standings that did win tonight. They actually completely dismantled Western Carolina.
Oh my goodness!
85-37.
Yeah.
So maybe at the end of the day we're going to be talking Furman when we've been talking all kinds of other teams in this conference.
But
Usually we talk about parity when it comes to the Big South, but now it has spread to the SoCon.
it has, and it really. I'm really disappointed in Chattanooga. At the beginning of the year, we were thinking possible on the bubble, inside the bubble type of profile. And when that fell off, you're still, like you said, thinking about a 12 or a 13 seed. They got a 12 last year, actually, and they have everybody back and then some. And then for them to just go out, I mean, that was embarrassing. I mean, I almost hope they had the flu or something because they looked pitiful tonight.
Well, let's turn around here and go back to the rest of the conferences and start in the America East, where Vermont had a very nice win. Talk about more games tonight. Won at Albany tonight, always a difficult place to win. Looked pretty good in this game here. Now 7-0, a game up on Stony Brook, who has been really surprising in conference play.
Yeah, Stony Brook has. I like this Vermont team more and more and more and more. And you look at that. I don't think they're going to make a run at the bubble. I just don't think they have that opportunity. But if you pull up their profile here and you see 7 true road wins, that's pretty impressive. And then 2 more on neutral floors. And then you look at their losses here. At South Carolina. South Carolina's in the rankings. South Carolina's probably a first ballot team. Northeastern, that one you're kind of holding your nose at Butler.
Butler and Houston, who is a competitive team at least. And that was only a 1-point loss.
Right.
I think one of the other notable results for tonight was actually between Stony Brook and UMBC, and this was another big win for the Steve Wolves that solidifies them into second place, and they're also a game up on our Team of the People who beat Lowell tonight.
Yeah, first of all, huge game cut up Saturday here in the America East. Again, Vermont is on the road at Stony Brook, their toughest test by far of the season. But, David, we wanted to talk a little bit of Team of the People of the New Hampshire Wildcats before we move on to our next conference. Let me pull up their resume here because we were talking about this after we recorded our Under the Radar podcast last week, in fact, and taking more and more of a closer look at this 14-7 overall record and these 7 losses. And we just realized that they don't really have 7 losses, do they?
None of them are legit. That Abilene Christian game, it's all about how you finish. I believe, didn't they fall behind by 25 and then came back and got it down to 8 or 6? I mean, it's all about the second half. And there was a stupid promotion that night. It was Country Western night. And the guys were just distracted. You can't be having Country Western night.
Country Western night when you're playing a team from Texas.
Right. And then we have this loss at West Virginia, and again, I don't think the score indicates just how close this game was, but it's important to point out this game was part of a tournament that the Team of the People won. So therefore, I think they should be given a credit for winning this game since they won the whole tournament.
Yeah, and look a little bit further on down here. The game at Providence, John. What's the arena that they play at in Providence there?
Oh, the Dunkin' Donuts Center?
What the hell? What the hell does donuts have to do with basketball?
Right. You can't, you cannot expect a team to take you seriously and to take a game seriously if you play at Dunkin' Donuts. I went to Dunkin' Donuts this morning, and they have coffee, they have donuts, they have, sandwiches. I could understand how that could be an issue.
There's a donut box, and then there's having to play at the roof at Boston University.
Exactly, John. I was just going to get there. If not as bad as playing at the Dunkin' Donuts, you got to play on the roof. I mean, at least play in the building. What the hell?
They don't even play. I just want to know, how you could. And again, the Team of the People, they take basketball seriously, and for someone that doesn't, you can't. If you take basketball seriously, you cannot. I mean, it would be like going to a concert in a lake. You just can't do it.
Now, the Dartmouth game, we all know that they actually won the game, and there was a bad call at the end there.
Bad call. I mean, what happened there was the clock operator started the clock too early, and time expired before the final game-winning shot went in.
The Stony Brook game,
Yeah, again, a clock operating error.
and finally this Vermont game didn't even count, did it?
No.
So as a result of that, in fact, you look at this, Vermont. Vermont is in New England, right?
Yes.
Now, where's the Seacoast at? Because New England's all about the Seacoast, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's no seacoast in Vermont. It's not really the America East.
Well, they got Lake Champlain. I mean, that's not the Atlantic Ocean last time I
No.
checked.
No.
I know we're not normally supposed to break in, but Mark Fox is having quite the meltdown at Georgia right now. Just got ejected and was having quite the tirade right now at the officials.
Okay, we'll have to go back and see what that's about.
And Mark Fox's ejection is probably part of the reason why this score came out 71-59 in that Vermont game too. We'll find a way to tie that in. But anyhow, David, if we do go back to this team here, I don't think they're 14-7. I think they're 21-0, aren't they?
Yeah, or at least, if not 21-0, 17 or 18-0. Like, you'd have to throw some of those results out.
Okay.
Question about Vermont. Like, this is normally a conference that we see hovering around the 15 and 16 line, but in recent years it's been better than that. If Vermont, which this is entirely hypothetical because we're expecting it to be New Hampshire, but if it is Vermont and where do you expect them to be? Is this the second year in a row they're on the 13 line?
I mean, if they can literally win out, I mean, win every single game from now until the conference and all the way through the conference tournament, I think they're solidly on the 13 line. I think they could be towing the 12 line. I don't think they tow an at-large bid. Not that it would matter if they won the conference tournament, but I think that they could be up in the 12 line. John, would you agree?
They could, but if I remember correctly, they were actually a 13 the year they beat Syracuse in the first round in Worcester.
I don't think they had as good of a resume that year as they would if they won out the rest of this season, though.
They had Taylor Coppenrath.
And TJ Sorrentine.
Yeah.
Well, let's get things moving here. Let's switch over to the Atlantic Sun, where we saw one of the more surprising results of the week this past week when Florida Gulf Coast lost to South Carolina Upstate.
Yeah, at home, and this was after winning 3 conference road games to start conference play. So a little bit of a surprise there. They got the big win tonight at North Florida. Real exciting game. Very poor played game, but very exciting game.
Well, and then Upstate, which was starting to creep into the standings, went and lost to Lipscomb tonight. So we kind of I still think Gulf Coast could run away with this conference, but if they don't, there are a lot of teams right there only a game behind them.
Right. And let's touch on a couple. What is wrong with Stetson? A team that finished so strong and almost won the conference last year, a conference tournament. With everybody back, we were expecting maybe not them to contend for first place, but at least maybe contend for, I don't know, 6th.
And NJIT as well. I expected them to be in the top of the conference, and they've been awful.
I guess they're missing Kai Howard and Jim Mangles more than we thought.
I think maybe Jim Mangles more than anything. Interestingly enough, North Florida and Gulf Coast play again on Monday, coming up Monday night, this time at Gulf Coast. That was a very good game tonight. Came right down to the final minute.
Yeah, fun to watch.
John, let's move over to the Big Sky Conference, where Weber State continues to have the lead over the likes of North Dakota and Eastern Washington.
Yep, North Dakota is another team that's quietly been creeping towards the top, as has Eastern Washington after their brief slide, although I think Chad also had some news that he wanted to get into as far as North Dakota goes.
In fact, North Dakota, and this should become official tomorrow from what I'm hearing, though, they should be officially invited for football purposes over to the Missouri Valley Football Conference. As a result of that, they already have the invitation, which they will accept tomorrow at the same time, to move all other sports to the Summit League, starting not next season, but the year after. So next season will be their last season in the Big Sky, after which they will be moving over to the Summit League, joining the other 3 Dakota schools, getting them all to get back together again, where they really belong.
Right, and it does open up well, I don't know what the Big Sky's plan is, if they plan to stay at 11 or if they're going to look to go back out to 12, maybe snatch up a WAC school, maybe snatch up a Division II school that wants to transition up. But I normally like traditional and regional rivalries, but I love this move by North Dakota. It puts them with North Dakota State and South Dakota State. And as a football conference at the FCS level, I think it makes all the sense in the world as well, because the Missouri Valley Conference is a power football conference at the FCS level. Multiple teams in the rankings, multiple teams in the top 10, and of course North Dakota State, who is the Alabama of that division.
Yeah. Well, North Dakota has had some pretty good football the last few years as
Right.
well. So it'll make some fun football there too for those of you that are football fans out there. David, Big South Conference. Winthrop now with a one-game lead over both Asheville and Liberty, but another conference that's been really fun so far.
Yeah, I really like this this Winthrop team. I still just can't accept that Liberty is 6-2 in the league. As bad as they looked out of conference, I don't know. I'll have to research this. I admit not knowing this, and I apologize to any Liberty fans that may be watching the show. Were they without a key player? I mean, that is – I realize this isn't a power league, but it was just they were pathetic, and now they're playing very well.
Well, but David, the other thing here, I think that their record in conference is kind of a factor of the schedule. Presbyterian, Charleston Southern, Campbell, High Point, Radford, Gardner Webb. Those are their wins. They lost the Asheville game. They lost the Winthrop game. I think that maybe they just happened to catch some of the more beatable teams in this league early in the season. I don't expect Liberty to remain up top there. I do expect Asheville and Winthrop to be right there at the end of the day.
There was a team like Longwood that actually also got off to a fast start themselves, but they've faded quite a bit in recent weeks.
Winthrop with the notable win by under the radar standards anyway at Illinois. I like this team a lot. I've liked them the last several years. I feel that had they gotten to host the conference tournament, which they should have been able to, they would have won at least one of them. Hopefully they get it done this year. It's been a while since they've been back. And I think this is the best team they've had since Pat Kelsey took over.
Right. And no, Presbyterian down there, one of the few winless teams in conference play that's left in the nation. Kind of take a look at that as we go through some of these other conferences. We have a winless and an undefeated team out in the Big West, where I think we finally found a team with a pulse, John.
Yes.
This UC Irvine team, 6-0 in conference play, after the Big West had looked so pathetic so early this season.
Yeah, I guess it didn't really help to have, Long Beach State and Cal Poly on TV late on Saturday night if you happen to see that game. So Cal Poly blew their chance to, get off the schneid in the Big West.
Yeah, this Irvine team, though, is undefeated in conference play, has beaten Northridge, has beaten won at Cal Poly, beaten Hawaii once already. Probably maybe their toughest test coming up this weekend when they're at UC Davis, who is off to the second best start among conference teams, at least.
Yeah, if we could go back real quick, I mean, it is a very drastic turnaround. If you look at this win streak, it followed what was by far their most unimpressive result, and that was only winning at UTEP by 5.
In fact, if you look at the schedule right there, it seemed like the only real bad loss that Irvine had was against Milwaukee. I mean, you look at the other teams: Akron, 16-3; New Mexico State, 16-2; Nevada, 16-4, and well, Utah State's another bad loss.
Yeah, that Utah State game was at home, so that's kind of a bad loss. But I do agree, David. I think that the only win beating UTEP by 5 on the road is also just as good as a bad loss.
Right. Yeah.
But I think at this point, Irvine should probably run through the league the rest of the way. David, the Colonial, another week, same story.
Yes. UNC Wilmington, you have them there. You see the RPI hovering around 26. That's getting into the categorical all automatically in range. And again, because of the nature of the conference, they're just one bad week away from falling off the cliff. But I really like this team. They had a big win last week at Charleston. I believe Charleston's only lost 1 or 2 games at home. They should get a lot of credit for that. Just the sheer number of wins they have away from home is very impressive. They're good enough to win out. I think they will win out. And if they do, I think they're in regardless of what happens in the Colonial Tournament. Another thing about this team is we see this every year, or at least in the year that it happens. They're on the cusp of the top 25. And once they get into the top 25, all of the national reporters will suddenly be picking this team as a dark horse. And, you got to watch out for this. And doing their best to sound smart after the fact. I would like to point out that in October, we were all over this team.
Yeah, we were. There they are. They just missed the top 25 of the coaches poll. They may very well be there next week, which means, number one, they will no longer be under the radar. But number two, like you just said, everybody's going to be screaming about what a wonderful team this is. A couple games to look forward to. February 2nd, they host Charleston, the revenge game, but it is at home. Also circle this February 16th game at Northeastern. That could be a bit of a trap game as well.
Yeah.
Don't overlook Elon either.
What about College of Charleston? If anybody's going to beat them in the tournament, I think it's this C of C team. And I know that they just lost at home to them, but this is – let's just spend a minute or a few – let's at least mention what a drastic turnaround this program has undergone since being a complete mess a couple of years ago.
They were a complete mess when Doug Wojcik left, yeah.
Yeah.
But Earl Grant has done an absolutely amazing job. He's not a guy that had a lot of coaching experience coming in either, but really got this team program going the right way. We've been kind of praising him for about 2 years now about the job he's done there with this team. One thing I'd also note here is that this conference tournament will be in Charleston, so they will have the home court advantage there.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's on their home court. I think it's in the Coliseum, but yeah, in their home city anyway.
All right. Let's move over to Conference USA. And John, we just talked potential at-large bid for Wilmington. Obviously, another team that's undefeated in their conference here in Conference USA that we definitely think is an at-large bid contention.
Yep, Middle Tennessee is definitely looking the part of a conference leader, and Louisiana Tech is also quietly hanging around. But I think the biggest disappointment this week was actually going to be UAB, who split their road trip at Florida Atlantic and actually lost at FIU.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say North Texas losing again. And the biggest surprise being UTEP has now won 3 straight games, but somehow.
I mean, that is almost unbelievable. I mean, it's just a testament to how weak this team is once you get past Middle Tennessee, or weak this league is once you get past Middle Tennessee.
Yeah, Middle Tennessee's week this week is at home with Southern Miss and Louisiana Tech. But circle that game coming up on the weekend here against Louisiana Tech. If anybody else has showed a pulse the last few weeks, it's been this Bulldogs team, David. Not even discussed much this year, but quietly after this 6-1 start in conference play.
Yeah, and again, winners of 7 of their last 8, albeit one of those was a D2 team. One at Charlotte, one at Old Dominion. They have the big game. Well, yeah, this week it's a big trip. They could very well end up losing both of those. But if they split this, or even if they get one of them, you got to start looking at them not as an NCAA team, but certainly a possible NIT team, and at the very least the CIT looking at them.
I guess the other question as it relates to Louisiana Tech is how many of ththose pieces are still holdovers from Mike White's regime?
Fair amount.
All right. John, over in the Horizon League, we're done with Oakland, correct?
Yep. I mean, they were lucky, it seems, to get a split on their road trip to, Ohio, the OKI region. They actually won at Northern Kentucky, but they were unable to hold off Wright State on the road.
Yeah. And, David, so we're back on this Valpo team as being the best team in this conference. And I guess kind of the question is what type of seed could this Valpo team get?
I'm thinking they're hovering around the 12 or 13 line. Probably. I mean, we've been giving them a 13 in our mock brackets. I think that the committee has them about the same place we do.
Right. If you look, they still have a few tough tests. They haven't gone to Green Bay yet. They haven't gone to Oakland yet. And they're going to finish the season with 4 out of 5 on the road. So
apparently they haven't gone to Detroit yet either.
That's only difficult if your name is Oakland, though.
Right.
David, over the Ivy League, a pair of undefeated teams, a pair of winless teams. Penn, despite being winless in conference, actually picked up a win tonight at LaSalle in a Big Five game, though.
Yeah, which they're doing much better in the Big Five than they are in the Ivy League so far.
Still not much in terms of conference play. In fact, Princeton does not play at all this week. They have the entire week off. Harvard has a pair of games at Cornell and Columbia. So we could actually end up with next week having Harvard in first place if they can sweep that trip, John.
Pretty much.
All right. But I think we're probably still 2 more weeks away from really being able to talk about Ivy League as the teams really get going into conference play so late in this league because it's such a small conference. Only 4
right. I'm still thinking it's a 3-horse race. 3 of the 4 tournament teams will be Princeton, Harvard, and Yale.
All right, and that's going to be the biggest question is who gets that 4th spot. Can Penn move up and get the home court advantage, or is it going to be a Cornell or a Columbia?
Right.
And if I'm not mistaken, I believe our colleague John Titel will actually be in attendance for that tournament.
Oh, yes.
He's working on it, yep. Metro Atlantic, Monmouth lost 2 games early in conference play, but has rebounded back and has looked very good recently, David.
Yeah, they're good, and this is a dangerous team. I mean, because it's a live wire team, and if you look at some of their losses, they don't have the wins they need to be an at-large caliber team. And even if they did, I think that loss at Ryder is looking pretty bad. But, you know, they lost at North Carolina, or excuse me, at South Carolina in overtime at the buzzer. Not a whole lot of shame losing in Syracuse, but this team can't land inside the bubble, but they are really they could really make life miserable for a 4 or a 5 seed if they end up winning out.
Yeah. Another reason Monmouth has the outright lead now is because St. Peter's also had a loss during the week.
Yeah.
Right. I would kind of circle, though. I was going to mention circling a couple games coming up in Monmouth's schedule, not this week, but in a few weeks here at Siena, February 13th, at Iona to end the regular season. Siena is a team that's starting to show a bit of a pulse now in conference play, sitting here at 6-4 and 2 games back after they were atrocious during the non-conference part of the season.
Right, and you still can't help but think that their ceiling is rather high, and they're hosting the conference tournament, so they are potentially dangerous, but they kind of ruined a chance for themselves to, if not make a run at the bubble, give themselves a manageable seed if they happen to win this league. I think Monmouth will have one if they get in. I think you're looking 12 or 13, so a win isn't completely outside the realm of possibility, but not for Siena. They're looking probably at the 15 line.
Over the Mid-American, the Akron Zips now have a 3-game lead on the rest of the conference, both divisions. I think we got a nice, good battles going here in the West Division. We got 5 teams there within a game of each other, but and the battles for second place with Ohio, Kent, and Buffalo involved there. But Akron is running away with this conference. Antonio Campbell, the defending MAC Player of the Year for Ohio U, is now out for the season. He's done, so that's maybe it for Ohio as well.
Yeah. I like this Akron team. It's been a while, probably since Kent State did it, and I forget the year, 07, 08, it's something like that, that a team has run away from this league. If Akron does it, I think they're inside the bubble. I really do.
And that was a question I was about to ask you, John. They started the season with the loss to Youngstown. Their only other losses at Creighton and at Gonzaga. But in terms of looking for top 100 wins, Georgia Southern at home, Marshall at home, they don't really have them. Do you think this team could get inside the bubble if they slip up in the MAC tournament and win the rest of the regular season games?
I mean, I know we're splitting hairs here, but it seems like that Creighton game may get steadily worse as the season goes, albeit for different reasons.
But no, I think the committee will count that as the equivalent of a top 10 loss, even if Creighton is 50th in the nation at the time, though.
But I guess to your earlier point, I see no reason why Akron can't go, 16-0 or at worst 14-2 in the conference this year.
David, there's some tough games they have, including they haven't played their arch rival Kent State yet. They'll play them twice. Trip to Eastern Michigan is always difficult as well.
Yes. Actually, let me correct myself. 18-0 or at worst 16-2.
Well, 16-2 in the conference is not going to put them inside the bubble, though. David, will it?
I don't believe it will. I think they literally have to win out.
Let's keep going on here and move over to the MEAC, one of our favorite conferences. David, the Eagles are finally back, at least tied in the loss column for first place there.
Yeah, and I still like them better than everyone else. They did have the one loss, which was really surprising, but I still think that they're just in a class above the rest of the league.
And Salika, let me ask you about the bottom of the MEAC here. North Carolina A&T, they've actually got a trip to North Carolina Central coming up this weekend, and then at Norfolk State on Monday, and then Wednesday at Delaware State. Those 3 games over the course of the next week. Can they lose out, and can they win the centenary by doing that?
Well, it looks like their KPI has actually improved because if I'm not mistaken, we noticed this off the air, their KPI was actually 352. Care to explain how that's possible?
We'll get to that in the SWAC, actually. You're talking about another team, but yes, their KPI is actually the second worst. We'll get to this in a bit, though. KPI has 352 teams in it, despite there only being 351 D1 teams.
Yeah.
We'll figure that out in a while. But winless against D1, the only team in the country that's winless against D1 competition.
Yeah.
So right now, our front runners to win the centenary, but we're going to get to another team in a few minutes here that has a shot to catch them.
All right.
David, Missouri Valley Conference.
Yes, and this is exciting stuff. We have 23 seconds to go, and Illinois State has a 2-point lead over Indiana State, the team that did not upset Butler because it wasn't an upset according to some. Not a really impressive showing tonight by Illinois State, who I really like, who I've been putting in my field, and who I think the committee will at least put squarely on the bubble, if not sneak them inside if they win out, but they almost kind of blew all that tonight.
Well, here's that Illinois State profile. We'll get a final score update for you here in a couple of seconds. I see 21 seconds left. It's a 2-point game.
Well, that is close. Good job by Warren Nolan there. That is exactly as I look at the television here.
So as we record this, but John, Wichita State, can this team get in? Can we get 2 bids out of the Valley still, do you think?
I still think there's a decent shot as long as both Wichita and Illinois are able to run the table for the most part, because we still haven't seen other bubble teams really separate themselves, although Georgia Tech, that may be one that's going to make the Shockers a little bit nervous.
Yeah, David, one of the things I look at here is the Sagarin and the KenPom ratings here in the low 20s for Wichita State, and those are very impressive numbers, but I don't know where the meat is on the resume, though.
I don't know enough. Well, I don't know enough about either one, but KenPom is based on efficiency rating, not so much on merit. So if you're beating teams impressively, which Wichita for the most part has been doing, doesn't it inflate the ranking? I mean, we need Matt here or Kyle Lamb here or one of the numbers gurus who could probably do a better job of explaining it. But essentially, it factors in how you win, not more so than who you beat. Is that correct? That
is my understanding. In fact, the KenPom rating here of the 22 is a factor of the adjustive of his offensive or defensive ratings, which are right here. You see they're both top 50 ratings, offense 23rd. That's something that pushes it up to the high KenPom. Sagarin rating is kind of a predictive analysis of how teams are going to be going forward as well. Whereas the RPI and the KPI are more results-based and much worse.
Yes.
Now, here's what would make me real nervous if I'm a Wichita State fan. If this is the way the bracket shapes up, they would be facing Northern Iowa in the quarterfinals. That is not a team I want to have any part of in March, because Northern Iowa has quietly won 3 games in a row and is doing their usual disappearing and reappearing act in January and February.
All right, let's take a look at the next conference. And John, the Northeast Conference, we now have a 2-way tie with FDU and Mount St. Mary's after Fairleigh Dickinson beat Brooklyn. But the Mount beat Fairleigh Dickinson head-to-head. So, have we been ignoring the Mount this season? We should be paying more attention.
Well, I think the tiebreakers favor the Mount right now, but they also played a pretty killer non-conference schedule themselves. So that's why their RPI is actually in the top half as opposed to other teams in the Northeast who are a little bit lower. I mean, look at those losses. West Virginia, Iowa State, Minnesota, Texas Arlington, Michigan, Arkansas. Even Bucknell is a respectable loss. And actually beat George Mason, so.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, that for their one non-conference, compensated actually 2 non-conference wins. Bit of a surprise that they lost that game at Bryant, but that's the only blemish on the record. But they have beaten Fairleigh Dickinson. They won at Long Island. David, I think you got to list them as your favorite now, don't you?
Well, yeah, based on what they've done just within the league, you pretty much have to, especially with the win over LIU Brooklyn.
All right.
Love this league. Great league.
The Ohio Valley Conference?
This one,
Okay.
yeah, that one too.
On Belmont 7-0. Here.
Let's get to it. And what do you think about this Belmont team? I saw them play a couple times out of conference and kind of dismissed them and have watched them casually. But the couple games I've seen in conference, I think they've woken up and 14-4 overall, blowing through some teams here. Real nice win in their last game at Eastern. I mean, I know Eastern Illinois ain't anything special, but you know they're coming out of a stretch where 4 of their last 6 games were on the road and they won them all.
Well, I agree with you. I think that this Belmont team, John, what type of seed do you think this Belmont team could end up with if they continue to roll through this conference and don't get upset by Austin Peay in the conference tournament?
I was going to say, if they can run the table, I would say they're stealing probably a 13. But what happened to Tennessee State? I mean, right now, if this holds up, I'm not sure they even qualify for the OVC because it's just the top 8 teams that survive and advance.
Yeah, they'd be in the tiebreaker with Austin Peay for that last spot as we speak right now.
And that's kind of inexplicable.
One team that won't be there, David, SIU Edwardsville, another one of these winless teams in conference play. Very rough season.
Yeah. Can't really see him. And again, a recent transition team. It's a tough process to go through. We've seen schools do it with various types of luck. They're more of in the bad luck category. They just really haven't gotten it going yet.
I do want to give a quick score update here that Illinois State did win that game against Indiana State tonight, so they do remain undefeated in the Valley. And it's going to just look as a win at the end of the day. It's not going to look much worse than that. Bucknell out to an 8-1 start, David, and blowing away the Patriot League.
Yeah, another league that we haven't really seen anyone run away from for the last 2 or 3 years. Bucknell seeming to do it this year. A team that's capable of playing well, and not to the degree that Clemson has, but that seemed to be very good at almost winning games, is Lehigh, and now they're finally winning games. Good grief. I didn't notice this before the show, but we have got a 4-way tie for second place via the loss column there, Chad. So with the exception of Bucknell, all's normal in the Patriot League.
That might even be a 4-way tie. I don't know that. I think Holy Cross game went final very recently, and I think they may have won tonight as well. So we'll take a look at that.
Although one team that had quite the weekend, I should say, was Navy. They actually played the Army-Navy game, the first leg of it. I think it was that Army actually went to overtime, and Navy actually outscored the Black Knights 21-5 in overtime.
Army had another interesting finish against tied for second place Boston U. Chad alerted me to it, but go ahead and tell us how that ended.
Oh yeah, this was tonight's game. Army was at BU tonight, and game went overtime. Army was down 2 with about a second and a half left. Put up a shot from beyond the half-court stripe to try to win the game. Shot wasn't close, but he was fouled on the shot from beyond half-court. 3 free throws awarded to Army, who promptly missed 2 out of 3, and so BU got the 1-point win. But
up on the roof, craziness up on the roof.
It was a crazy game, definitely. The SoCon was actually, we started off the show with this. I just want to give a quick update here. We mentioned that East Tennessee State game against Samford tonight. They are now in overtime with about 3 minutes left in overtime. So
this has been a really exciting game. Samford not quite to the front of the league yet, but another team that's very much improved from where they were 2 or 3 years ago.
But John, the Southland Conference, the New Orleans Privateers remain in first place here.
Yep, New Orleans remains in first place, and yet Sam Houston still seems to be perpetually lurking half a game behind. Still the luckiest team in Division I.
And David, what about Southeastern Louisiana, a team that's been pathetic in recent years, quite honestly, and sitting right here tied with Sam Houston in the loss column?
Yeah, it seems like there's one of these teams every year in the Southland that is just not just bad, but beyond bad as a program. Houston Baptist was that team last year. Didn't they get out to a 6-0 start or an 8-0 start? Sela, that team this year, right there, one game out of first place behind the New Orleans Privateers, another team that hasn't been good recently, but that we like to win the league and advance to the Elite Eight.
Well, I'll tell you what, with Stephen F. Austin no longer being the powerhouse here, this has become a very interesting conference.
Yeah.
Only the top 8 teams qualify for the conference tournament, so that I think we're going to have some interesting battles late in the season for those final conference tournament spots as well.
Yeah, now how many? Because we've got Abilene Christian and
Abilene Christian and Incarnate Word are both ineligible. So right now,
right.
everybody Abilene Christian's on the bottom, but everyone through Central Arkansas would be in. Hughes Baptist would be one of the teams that is out right now.
Kind of surprising to see Corpus Christi that low.
Yeah, after looking pretty good out of conference there. I mean, they were our projected champion there for a couple of weeks.
Right. Right now, I still think Sam Houston's going to end up pulling it out at the end of the day.
Yeah, as do I.
Over in the SWAC, and here we are, John, where we're talking about the 352nd KPI team. Let's start right there at the bottom. Even though they beat Mississippi Valley State on the road, ranked 351 in the RPI, 351 in the KenPom, 351 in the Sagarin, 351 in strength of schedule, 351 in adjusted defense, and 352 in the KPI.
And I guess you'd still rather be ranked that low than end up being a puppet.
What's that supposed to mean?
That's our Where's Waldo for this week.
But the other note here, though, was Texas Southern. I just mentioned that Mississippi Valley State is the team that lost to Alabama A&M. David, Mississippi Valley State that beat Texas Southern. What the hell?
It was remarkable. It was in overtime. It was ridiculous. We were watching it, which was also ridiculous. We were all watching it together. None of us could believe it. And at one point, one of the things I'll say about Mississippi Valley, it's the first time I've seen them play at home this year. There were 1,000 people at that game, well supported for a team that's struggling as much as they've been. So, if nothing else, I'm impressed with their fans. Good job for the fans that were at that game. And did they run onto the court? I forget if they did or didn't.
They did not.
Okay.
No court storming. Sorry, David.
Yeah.
John, the Summit League, another conference that we seem to have one team running away with it at this point.
Yep, and I guess we have to ask, can we finally write off Fort Wayne? Although I guess with a win against IUPUI, they've actually made it back up to 500 in the Summit.
David, I'm done with them. Are you done with them?
Yes.
Okay.
But I guess to your point, it is a North Dakota State's league to lose now.
Yep.
You had a question, David?
What happened to Fort Wayne? Just real disappointing after looking so good out of conference. Some pretty decent metrics here for North Dakota State. We're looking at.
Here's Fort Wayne. They look so good out of conference because they beat Indiana. They didn't really beat anybody else of note out of conference, quite honestly, David. I mean, they kind of have a rough conference schedule here, having to do the Dakota trip early on and going 3 in it, so that kind of hurt a bit. But
right, and then Western Illinois at home. That is just an atrocious loss.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
But anyway, some decent metrics here for North Dakota State. Real healthy RPI by under the radar standards. Top 100 by all accounts across the board. And, 13, 14 line, where do they end up if they keep running away from it like this?
I don't think they can make the 13 line. I think their 14 line is their cap. John, would you agree?
I suppose, but I would also say for every disappointment, there is also a pleasant surprise, and that would be the South Dakota Coyotes. I mean, they were one of the teams that beat Fort Wayne, and they're now actually tied with Denver for second in this league.
Yeah, kind of South Dakota and South Dakota State switching spots here, which is a little abnormal in this conference.
Can we name this the Dakota Conference?
We can in 2 years. How's that?
Okay.
Sun Belt Conference, where Georgia Southern continues, David, to run away with the conference, despite the fact that I still like Arlington better than them.
I do as well. But, I mean, we're almost halfway through league play, and they haven't lost yet. And they've beaten some of the better teams in the league. It wasn't like a soft schedule on the front end so much. I mean, we're 7 games into it. They have just absolutely kicked it in gear. And what was amazing was prior to conference play, I think that they were actually 5-6, 4-6, whatever it was, against Division I teams that we weren't really looking at all and had no reason to. So just a complete 180 here.
Yeah, but Arlington's still now 15-5 overall, 55 in the RPI.
Yeah.
Does Arlington have any shot here? Should they run the table the rest of the way, David, or is it too late with their conference losses that they did suffer to Texas?
I think they'll be on the board, so they'll have a shot if they win out. But realistically, I think they'll need the automatic bid even if they do win out. Let me put it this way. I think they'll be on the board, and if it were debate class, we could make a case for them if we really had to. The volume of road wins, the win at St. Mary's being better than what most of the rest of the bubble will have. You could make a case for them so they have a chance, but if you're asking me to guess, I would say no even if they win out. What do you think?
I mean, the Sun Belt has a lot of tricky road trips here, and the trip to Appalachian State and their first trip to Coastal Carolina is certainly one they're going to have to watch out for.
Yeah, I circle those, and of course, their next road trip coming in towards the end of February. That trip to the Georgia schools is a real killer.
Right.
Pulling that conference standings back up, Louisiana Monroe. This is a team that went 6-7 out of conference and 0-7 now in league play. Very disappointing from this Monroe.
Real disappointing. And Appy State too was looking pretty good for a minute. As South Alabama, you liked them; they've fallen off. So
yeah, they completely.
It's a little bit upside down from how we thought it was going to look. At about mid-December here.
Last but not least, the Western Athletic Conference. And David,
Yes.
because I'm not going to let you do it tomorrow night when we do our bracket rundown, I'm going to let you do it tonight. Make your New Mexico State case. Let me pull up this profile here. Because I think you believe they're an at-large caliber team.
I think they're an at-large caliber team. I do not think the committee will take them. I'm almost certain they won't. They've never really taken a team with a profile like this, no matter how bloated the record is. I don't think they're going to take this one. But just look at them. I mean, they have the only 2 losses. One of them was at New Mexico, and they've been holding serve the whole time.
And as a note, after Gonzaga, they now have the second longest winning streak in the nation.
Right, and Grand Canyon, who's a pretty good team, beat them handily. They did have to sweat out Bakersfield at home. I was a little surprised by that, but clobbered UMKC. So they've been winning without having to sweat, and they just look pretty good.
And John, how about this big rivalry game coming up Monday night for New Mexico State?
Yeah, I guess southern New Mexico and eastern New Mexico weren't available because didn't they already beat western New Mexico earlier in the year?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you got to figure that they're one of the top-ranked teams in the state.
Alamogordo have a branch campus for New Mexico.
Yeah, this league is so weak. It is. Wow.
All right, let's pull that down here for a second. And what we're going to do now is move over to our under-the-radar top 10 lists. And we'll get that back up here in half a second. But, David, here is our under-the-radar top 10 list, January 25, 2017. John, let me start with you. Do you agree with everything so far?
Bunch of blanks? Why not?
Okay, let's go here. Reveal our number 1 team. This was not unanimous. But it ended up being UNC Wilmington.
Ooh, really?
I believe one of us, David, thought that Middle Tennessee, David, was better than them. David.
Yes, and I've been voting to Middle Tennessee number 1 ever since mid-December, I think. I like both teams. I think they're both inside the bubble. Middle Tennessee did beat Wilmington.
Middle Tennessee did beat Wilmington. However, that was probably Wilmington's worst loss. Middle Tennessee, on the other hand, lost at home to Georgia State and Tennessee State.
Yeah, fair enough.
Although Tennessee State started to look worse than Georgia State, though.
Yeah, East Tennessee State Sanford going into double overtime. neither team is making the top 10. But
All right. We got Middle Tennessee obviously coming in number 2 there. Illinois State. Luckily, we didn't have to make a last-minute amendment here. They are the number 3 team after squeezing out the win over the Trees tonight.
yeah,
And John, how do we spell Akron again? You're not
You
playing the game.
you just muted me, so
Okay. Yeah, Akron is the number 4 team, and David, I think, deservedly so at this point.
kicking an injured Bobcats team when they're down.
yeah.
New Mexico State, David, who we just discussed here, comes in at number 5. And at number 6 is this Valpo team. This is a team that was kind of all over the board between the 3 of us. One of you,
where I had him, I think.
One of you had him at number 3 overall. Was that you, John?
Wasn't me. Huh.
Number 3, let me check my notes.
So
I don't think that was me.
I thought it was, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, yep, I did have them above Illinois State because I didn't know what the Redbirds were going to do tonight.
Okay. At number 7,
I've been
Wichita.
impressed with Wichita this year, but okay.
They're in the. I think that their power ratings, especially those 20s we were looking on and stuff like the Ken Palm and the Sagarin, is why I think Wichita belongs on this list at least. Towards the bottom of it, but on the list. Coming in at number 8 is that Monmouth team that we talked about how much we like the way they've been playing lately. And we don't have anybody there at number 9. Oh, there they are, the Nevada Wolfpack.
Yeah.
And we didn't even discuss the Mountain West, did we?
No, we forgot.
Well, David, go ahead. Tell me about the Mountain West.
It's a 1-bid league that will probably land somewhere between the 13 and 14 line if it's Nevada, and even lower than that if it's someone else. It is a pitiful, pitiful, pitiful league.
Yeah, and Nevada.
Good news. I got some good news for Nevada. They don't have to play Fresno State again until the Mountain West tournament.
Yeah, Nevada 0-2 against Fresno State this season, losing to them again this past week after we were starting to think that this Nevada team was creeping near the bubble.
Right.
Very disappointing for this Nevada team. They're playing Boise State, who is the second best team in that conference tonight, so we'll know a little bit more about them by tomorrow morning.
Mm-hmm.
Texas Arlington sneaks out that 10th and final spot.
Yeah. And I didn't vote for them, but I can live with that just because of the top of their profile being as good as it is.
Other teams that did receive votes, Vermont, Winthrop, and Georgia Southern. Stalika, your thoughts on the top 10 list overall?
Yep, you can probably look at me as far as the honorable mentions for Winthrop and Georgia Southern, given their performances in these conferences of late.
And David, you and I both had Vermont at number 10, which we both agreed that they belong in the top 10, especially with the win at Albany tonight.
Yeah, I like them. I think that I like them more than anybody else in the America East. I think that they win the right to host, and then they'll win the tournament. With the
team of the people?
The team of the people will win the tournament.
Okay, yeah, I thought that's what you said. Let me just do this real quick here. I will pull up the Mountain West standings to make things complete, just so we can show them. I don't even have the key upcoming games there because this conference, maybe we should just get rid of the conference. What do you think, Dave?
Right. It's kind of hovering between the Hoops HD report and under the radar. Like San Diego State having a nightmare of a season, which is kind of surprising how much they've fallen off this year. They just missed the tournament last year, but at the very least, they were on the bubble. They didn't get into the field, but they had to have been right there in the discussion. UNLV having a rough year. But the biggest thing is that this league just didn't get collectively. Did they even win a single game out of conference against a team that was likely to make the field? I don't think they did.
The best win probably was San Diego State. I believe they beat Cal. So
yeah, and Colorado State didn't. I thought they beat somebody, but now I can't remember who it was.
I can pull up their profile.
Colorado.
But
Which is not a likely tournament team.
Yeah, Colorado State's best wins here. Well, they beat New Mexico State, David.
Oh, shut up.
Well, that scared his intern off, so that's good.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and pull this down here, though, and let me run through each of you. Any other final thoughts for the evening about what's going on in the under the radar conferences?
Middle Tennessee and UNC Wilmington, if the committee does not put them inside the bubble, it's a shame because both of those teams are good enough to where they are at large caliber teams. not regardless of what their paper says, those are both very, very good teams.
John.
A little bit of a somber note, and this is what we found out earlier in the day. It's a former Old Dominion coach, Jeff Capel Jr., who is actually the father of acting Duke head coach Jeff Capel III, and also a former North Carolina player and Appalachian State head coach Jason Capel. Apparently, he has been diagnosed with ALS recently, according to his son. So, best wishes to Capel and his family at this time.
Yeah, I definitely want to echo that. I just want to end this with we did promise at the top of the show that we'd get you the final score in that East Tennessee State Samford game. We won't. You're going to have to go ahead and look up the scores, or maybe it'll even be in the write up right above us up there. But as we end the podcast, they are in the middle of double overtime. So, but
I'll give you a happier final thought right here. I mean, Chad has a mute button, but apparently he needs an eraser for Grig's screen.
An eraser, okay. In that case, on behalf of John Slika down there, David Griggs over there, again, I'm Chad Sherwood. Thanks for joining us for Under the Radar, and David's looking all around. We'll be back again tomorrow night with our bracket rundown, where we'll be talking about all these crazy upsets that happened among the top half dozen or so teams in the nation, and a lot more. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you again real soon.